Okay, good morning, guys. Today we're going to take our application that we've been building and we're going to publish it to AWS. I understand that some of you have exhausted your Azure credit or it has just expired. So we can host on Azure on AWS too for free for about 12 months with a free account. And so we're just going to get into it. I expect that we're going to be using Docker. So I expect that you have Docker installed. If you do not have Docker installed, hold on, I'm going to make my screen a little bigger so you can see better. I forgot to do that before I started. So I just take my scale up a bit. All right, great. So to install Docker, head to docs.docker.com/docker for Windows if you're on Windows. If you're on Mac, you can come to the Mac version here, or if you're on Linux, I'm sure there's something for Linux here. So if you're on Linux, you probably want to use just the install for Docker Engine. I expect that you have Docker installed, and if you have Docker installed, you should be able to run this command to make sure everything's fine. Docker run hello world. No, I haven't started Docker. So open up Docker. Let's see if it's running yet. So Docker is still starting. So Docker allows us to package a number of applications in the same virtual machine, and we're going to see how we're going to use it now. So once again, Docker run hello world. It should say unable to find image locally. And all of this. So if this runs successfully, then you're fine with Docker. If you get an error, you probably want to check your Docker installation. I'm going to clear this. So I have Docker installed. Next is AWS. So I expect you to create an AWS account. So after creating an AWS account, you sign into your console. I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Creating an AWS account is just as straightforward as creating an Azure account. You do need a card too, and they're going to take probably $1 from you. Well, I don't think that's too much for someone that wants to learn. Next, your own dashboard might not look like this, but what we want to do is we want to create a virtual machine. So when we use Azure, what we did was we created a database separately, and then we created a web app separately. Now, what we want to do here is we want to create a server, something called Elastic Compute Service on AWS, but it's really just a server, right? So we want to create a server here. We're going to come in here, and this server is going to be able to hold our database and our web application both within the same app, but within the same server, sorry. So to get started, after logging in, come to services, EC2. So I have a running instance here. I have a running instance here. So what you want to do is just come down here and say launch instance. I'm going to go to launch instance. And then I'm going to tell you what type of server I want to create. Now, like I told you guys before, servers are just computers that you connect to. So they're full-fledged computers that you connect to, but these computers are not in your house. They're in a data center somewhere. And just the way you can install databases and install programs and run applications on your own system in your house, that's the same way you can run applications on these systems. The difference is that these systems can be accessed from anywhere, and your own computer cannot be accessed from anywhere. So that is why we're going to run our application on one of these systems. And you can see we have different operating system. There's Amazon Linux, there's Ubuntu. I think there's Windows here somewhere. You can even create a Windows virtual machine. I'm going to go ahead and create an Ubuntu virtual machine, and you want to pick this one that says free tier eligible. I'm going to use the 18.04 LTS release, and I'm just going to hit select here. Now there are certain configurations that we want to do. Leave it on T2 micro, so then it's what's it called? It's free. So this one is free. If you pick any of these other ones, you will be debited. So leave it on the free tier one. The free tier allows you to use this for the first 12 months of your AWS sign up dates. So you really want to leave it on this one. Say next, configure instant details. You don't want to change anything here. Just leave all the defaults here for now. Go to add storage. You also don't want to change anything here, but we can see that our virtual machine has a hard drive size of 8 gigs, which is enough for our example here. We're not saving anything on it, we're just running the program, so 8 gigs is fine. Go to previous. Okay, so after we're on storage. After storage, we want to go to next, add tags. We're not adding any tags for now, but this is important. Configure security groups. So this allows people to access your application. This part allows people to access your computer, and you don't want to open your computer up to the cloud. You only need to open the ports that your application is going to connect to. For example, I'm going to create a custom TCP rule. I know that our application runs on port 5001, so I'm going to open port 5001. The source, I'm going to say you can connect to this machine from anywhere, so anywhere on the internet. And I'm just going to put application port here. The ports you open on your machine allow people to connect to your machine, and you don't want to open sensitive ports. You only want to open those ports that are necessary. For example, port 5001 needs to be opened for people to be able to connect to your application. I'm going to rename this security group name to app, estate app, estate app security group, and the description will just be estate app security group. Great. Now I can say review and launch. I just look at everything, make sure it's a T2 micro, make sure I have my 5001 here and all of that, and I can just say launch. Now I need to create something called a Keypair, and this is how I am going to connect. This is what is going to let me connect to this machine. So you can connect to the machine with a normal regular password after you have created this Keypair, but it's necessary for you to learn how to use this Keypair because it's very secure. If you're going to work in DevOps or something, or you're going to actually deploy to other people's servers, they will probably ask for your own Keypair to add, and we're going to do that very quickly. So I have some Keypairs already. So if I have a number of Keypairs here, or keys, but I'm going to create a new Keypair for this, and I'm going to name it estate app. And remember to download the Keypair. If you lose this Keypair, you've lost access to this virtual machine. You have to delete it and create a new one, so you have to keep it safe. So I'm going to go ahead and download this Keypair, and I'll simply say launch instances. While that's happening, I'm going to copy this showing folder. I'm going to copy this Keypair. I just cut it. Now I have a folder where I keep things like this, and you want to do that too. So before you do that, come to your command line and run SSH, and the command SSH. This just creates a couple folders and other things if they're not there already, and you want to come to local disk. That's after copying that file. Come to local disk, users, find your username. So my username is vwarner, and then you're looking for a file called .ssh. Open up .ssh and paste this estate-app.pem here. Leave .ssh open. We're still going to do some work here, and you see those other keys I have in my AWS account already. They're all here, so just leave them here for now. Let's see if this is done launching. Let's go to view instances. I'm going to pull this down a bit. Okay, so I have this instance. It's now running. It's fine now. I'm going to rename this instance to estate app. Great. After renaming it, the number of we can connect to this machine using this public IP. So if I bring this IP here and put it here, nothing happens because I don't have an application running on this VM currently. It's an empty VM. And we can access our application. So with Azure, we had something on the Azure website.net. With AWS, we can either access our application with this or with this. But the problem with these two, let's copy that again. So we can access our application with this. Copy. Now the problem with these two is that if we stop our application and start it, each time we stop our application and start it, they change. So we can't depend on them. So if we give someone this to look at our application with, and then something happens and we have to stop this because we can't stop it, I can come in here, action, and say instance state and say reboot. Maybe something went wrong or it's not working correctly, and I say reboot. This IP address is going to change. And then when they try to access, if we've already given this IP to someone and they try to access it, it's not going to be valid anymore. They won't be able to hit the application because this has changed. So what I recommend you do is to, on the side here, let's see, we're looking for elastic IPs. So come to elastic IPs. On an elastic IP, click on allocate IP address, and yes, I want Amazon's full of IP addresses. Click on allocate, and it gives me an IP address. Now this address is not going to change. I can rename this address and say estate app IP. I'm going to save this, and I believe I can come here and I can say, so while this is still selected, I can come here and say associate elastic IP address, and I want to associate it to an instance, and I can just associate it with this estate app. Now, what the difference? Private IP address, this is going to show by default, and no, I don't want to allow this elastic IP address to be associated. Now I'm just going to associate this. Now the difference is, instead of giving people this one 52.3 that can't change whenever the application restarts, this one is never going to change. So even if this application restarts 100 times, this is still going to tie to it. So you can always reach it with this address. Great. Next thing we want to do is to, remember I told you to leave this folder open. Next thing we want to do is to come into this folder and open up this file. This config file, if I correct, so right click on this file and open it with code. Open with code, and you see I have a number of configurations here. I'm simply going to go ahead and add a new one. I'll say host, and then I want this IP address that we created here. I'm simply going to copy it. This is the host. Host name, same thing. Identity file. I want to be the .ssh/ with the name of your key file. So if you name this file differently, I'm just going to, I'm just going to copy the name and I'll bring it here. So you want to put this here and then user Ubuntu. So when you create an Ubuntu virtual machine in Azure, by default it creates a user for you called Ubuntu. And if you have this done correctly, we can then pull up our our terminal, and then anywhere from your terminal, you want to be in your users directory in your terminal, because that is where the SSH file is. So you see I'm in CE users v1, and then you're going to go SSH Ubuntu at, and then you want that IP address, and then you hit enter. It's going to give you a message about fingerprints not installed. Just say yes. And if you notice, I am no longer on my own command line now. I am now in the Ubuntu virtual machine. Look at my terminal has changed. I am now within the virtual machine we created. And you see it's saying system information, blah, 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 documentation, help. I am literally in the server. Now, I don't know if that's clear. So, guys, we're ninjas now. If I type this command, lsb underscore release -a, you see I'm running Ubuntu 18 just as we selected, Bionic, blah, blah, blah. And we're literally in the server now. We're now ready to work with our server. The first thing we need to do is to install Docker and Docker Compose in this server, just as we installed locally. I should mention that after installing, okay, when you install Docker for Windows, it comes with Docker Compose by default. Just to confirm that I have Docker Compose on my own local system, I'm going to open another tab. This tab is on my local system, so I'll just run Docker Compose. Awesome. So I know that Docker Compose is installed because I have all of these messages. If it wasn't installed, it will tell me it doesn't recognize the command Docker Compose. But normally when you install Docker on Windows, it installs Docker Compose too. We're going to close this. What we want to do now is to install Docker and Docker Compose within our virtual machine. I'm simply going to pull up a DigitalOcean article. So an article you can follow too, that's what I'll be following. So I'm just going to Bing install Docker Ubuntu 18. DigitalOcean usually has really good articles on the subject, so I'll pull up a DigitalOcean article. Now you don't have to memorize these commands. I don't memorize them either, and this is something like I don't do every day. I mean, when you start working seriously, you would probably not do most of these things by hand. You just have a script that runs them. So the first command is sudo apt updates, and you probably want to read the messages as you go so you know exactly what you're doing, and I recommend that you do. But I have done this so many times that I know the messages, I know what I'm doing from saying the command. So I'm going to let that run. Remember, we're running this in the server. Next thing, I'll just copy the next command, run it, and then we're adding a key for the Docker repository. So I want to continue. Yes, I want to continue. Next command. Next command. Okay, we're going to update once again. Sudo apt update, and then package policy docker ce. Next, we can install Docker. So this is a command that actually goes in and installs Docker. Yes, I want it to run. And we're just going to let this run for a while. Next thing, so this command this is sudo system ctl status. So this just checks the status of Docker to make sure everything is running correctly. So I'll just clear this and just run. So we see that Docker is active and running. There's one more thing we need to do just to make sure everything can run correctly. You want to add your current user to the Docker user group. That's what we're doing here. If not, you're going to be having certain issues, especially when you're running scripts. I'll just run this, and then to complete it, I'm just going to exit the virtual machine. Now I'm in my virtual machine. I'm going to exit, and now I'm back in my system. If you've noticed, it says connection closed, and I'm back in my system, and I want to go back in. So SSH again, Ubuntu and I'm going back into my virtual machine. Good. If I say docker run hello world here now, you see I can run this successfully now. So it means Docker is installed here successfully. So that's it. The next thing we need to install here is Docker Compose, and again we're going to Google, we're going to Bing, install Docker Compose Ubuntu 18, and once again we're going to use DigitalOcean. You saw how straightforward it is. And once again, you want to read all of this. You might not understand everything, but it's still important to read it and pick what you can. And before you run this command, you want to click here and see the current release of Docker. So I'm going to check current release here, and these are the releases. We see that the latest release is 1.26.2. So I'm going to copy this and come back here and change the command here from 1.21 to okay, I should probably pull up a notepad. I just pull up a notepad, copy this command in there, and change what I have to change. Okay, so I need to change this to the latest version of Docker Compose. Nope. To 1.62, and now I can copy the command and run it. If you don't do this and you just copy the command straight from here, and this is why it's important that you read these things. If you just copy it straight from there, you're going to be installing an old version which might have issues. So I'm going to go in and paste this now, and it runs immediately. We just run the rest of the command. This is giving Docker Compose certain permissions, and then we're actually good to go. So we now have Docker Compose installed. We're now ready to run applications on our server here. So what we just did is we prepared a virtual machine in the cloud to run Docker and to use Docker and Docker Compose. We exposed the ports, and I'm going to be stopping this video here, and then from the next video we'll go into packaging our application and putting it on this server that we've installed. I'm going to go ahead and exit this. Thank you.